Welcome to the Sleep Dives channel. We are diving right back into Donella Meadows' absolutely incredible book, Thinking in Systems. And today, we're going to look at some of the most frustrating patterns that systems can fall into. Meadows calls them system traps, and we're going to explore what they are, and more importantly, how we can start to find a way out of them.
So let me ask you this. Have you ever been in a situation, maybe at work, maybe in your personal life, where you just feel stuck in a loop? Where every single thing you try to do to fix it just seems to make it worse? Well, these aren't just personal failings or a bit of bad luck. It turns out they are predictable, identifiable patterns called system traps.
All right, here's what we're covering. We'll kick things off by identifying 3 of the most common traps: the snowball effect of success to the successful, the dangerous dependency of shifting the burden, and what happens when our rules and goals go completely wrong. Then, we'll start looking at the beginning of a solution, finding something called leverage points.
First up is a trap I think we've all seen in action. It's that dynamic where having just a small initial advantage creates this reinforcing loop that just snowballs, pulling the winners further and further ahead and leaving everyone else in the dust.
So here's the core of it, the crucial dynamic. This system is set up so that winning itself gives you the resources you need to win even more. It's an incredibly powerful reinforcing feedback loop. You know the old saying, success breeds success? Well, this is it. The more you have, the more you get. The more you win, the easier it becomes to just keep winning.
Now, what's so fascinating here is just how universal this pattern is. Think about the game Monopoly, right? The first player to get a few hotels can charge these massive rents, and then they use that money to buy even more hotels until they bankrupt everyone else. In ecology, there's something called the competitive exclusion principle, which basically says 2 species can't occupy the exact same niche, because one will always be just a tiny bit more efficient, gain more resources, and eventually push the other one out. We see it in business, where hundreds of car companies became just a handful of giants, and of course, we see it in wealth distribution, the classic rich get richer scenario.
So how on earth do you break a cycle that powerful? Well, there are a few key strategies. First, diversification. If you're losing the game, well, maybe you need to change the game. Start a new one you can actually win. Second, you can actively limit how much the winner gets to take, using things like antitrust laws to stop monopolies. And finally, and this is maybe the most direct way, you can periodically level the playing field through policies like progressive taxes or universal education, just to give everyone a fighting chance.
Okay, let's move on to our next trap, and this one is incredibly sneaky. Meadows calls it shifting the burden, but honestly, the best way to think about it is like a system-level addiction. It's what happens when a quick fix makes us feel better right now, but it makes the underlying problem so much worse in the long run.
Here's how it works. You've got a problem, right? And instead of tackling the root cause, some external intervention just swoops in and takes care of the symptom. And that relief feels great, but over time, the system's own ability to solve that problem starts to atrophy, just like an unused muscle. And that's how you create a deep dependency on the intervention.
And this pattern is absolutely everywhere once you start looking for it. A farmer uses pesticides to kill pests. It works in the short term, but it completely ignores the deeper problem of poor soil health. An entire industry comes to rely on government bailouts instead of actually fixing its broken business model. And this last point is brilliant. Think about modern medicine. So often we get a prescription to manage a symptom, which can then weaken our own motivation to make the lifestyle changes that might address the root cause.
The real danger here, the absolute core of the problem, is that the so-called solution actually makes the system weaker. The more you rely on that quick fix, the less capable the original system becomes, and then it needs even more intervention just to stay afloat. It's a classic downward spiral of increasing dependency and disappearing resilience.
Right, now let's look at 2 related traps that pop up because of the rules we create to manage systems. Sometimes, even when we have the best intentions, our rules can lead to some really strange and counterproductive behavior. This slide does a great job of showing 2 ways rules can fail us. On one side, you have rule beating. That's when people get clever and find loopholes to follow the letter of the law, but they completely ignore the spirit of it. Then on the other side, you have seeking the wrong goal. This is totally different. This is when the system follows a rule perfectly, but the rule itself is just pointing everyone in the wrong direction.
Here is a classic example of rule beating. A lot of organizations have a use it or lose it budget rule. Now, the spirit of that rule is to encourage being responsible with money. But the behavior it actually creates is this mad dash at the end of the year to spend every last penny on things nobody needs, all just to make sure the budget doesn't get cut next year. They are literally beating the rule.
And for seeking the wrong goal, there is no better example than gross national product, or GNP. For decades, the main goal for most economies has been to just make the GNP bigger. But as this incredibly powerful quote suggests, GNP is a deeply flawed goal. It actually counts things like car crashes and medical bills as economic positives. It doesn't measure our health, our happiness, or the state of our environment. So by perfectly and obediently chasing a higher GNP, we might not be creating a better society at all.
So after seeing how systems can trap us like this, it is easy to feel a bit, well, discouraged. But here's the good news. Escaping these traps isn't about working harder. It's about working smarter. And this is where Meadows' work becomes truly empowering, because she shows us how to find a system's leverage points.
Okay, so what is a leverage point? Think of it like a trim tab on a massive ship. It's this tiny little rudder on the main rudder. A small, seemingly insignificant change in exactly the right place can shift the entire direction of a huge, complex system. These are the points of maximum power, of maximum efficiency.
But here's the catch, and honestly, it's a huge one. Systems scientist Jay Forrester, who was a mentor to Meadows, pointed out that our intuition about where to intervene in a system is often completely wrong. We tend to push on the most obvious parts, which are almost always the places with the least leverage. Sometimes we even push in the wrong direction and end up making the problem even worse. So Meadows created a hierarchy of 12 leverage points, and she ranked them from least powerful to most powerful. Today, we're just going to scratch the surface by looking at the very bottom of the list, starting with number 12, numbers. These are the simple parameters of a system, things like tax rates, subsidies, budgets. It's where most of our political debates happen.
Meadows has this brilliant analogy for this. She says tweaking these numbers is like arranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. We spend so much energy arguing about whether a tax should be 5% or 7%, but these changes rarely alter the fundamental behavior of the system. A new tax rate might cause a little shift in the short term, but it's not going to fix a deep, chronic problem.
Moving up just one tiny step on the leverage ladder, we get to number 11, buffers. A buffer is basically a stock that helps stabilize a system. Think of a large lake versus a narrow river. That lake is a huge buffer. It can soak up a massive amount of rain without flooding. The river, on the other hand, has a tiny buffer, so it floods easily. Making buffers bigger can definitely increase a system's resilience, but it's still a pretty low leverage intervention.
So as we start to wrap this up, I want you to think about this. Where do you see these traps playing out around you? Maybe at your job, in your community, maybe even in your own habits. Are the solutions you're trying just putting a plaster on the symptoms, or are they actually strengthening the system's ability to take care of itself?
All right, let's do a quick recap of the traps to avoid. First, watch out for systems where success just breeds more success. Second, always look for the root cause instead of just treating the symptom. Third, when you design rules, think about how people might try to get around them. And maybe most importantly, make sure you are aiming for a goal that truly reflects what you actually want to achieve.
Just being able to see these traps, these invisible structures, is the essential first step. It's like turning on the lights in a dark room. But the real magic, the path to creating real, lasting, positive change, comes from moving beyond just identifying problems and learning to see and act on a system's true leverage points. And we'll be exploring those more powerful points in our next segment.